Biology 1441, Biobites, the nature of science. What comes to mind when you hear the word science? What is it? What is science? What is a scientist? Picture a scientist in your mind. What does a scientist look like? And there's more than one answer. Einstein is not the only scientist. Scientists all subscribe to a basic worldview. The first tenet of this worldview is that the universe is understandable and is a single system, meaning that the patterns and processes of nature can be studied and understood, and knowing about one part of the universe helps us to understand other parts of the universe. So if I know how magma works on Earth, I have a pretty good understanding of how magma works on Mars. Or if I understand how gravity works on Earth, I have a good understanding of how gravity works in other parts of the universe. So the basic laws that govern physics, for example, here on Earth, appear to apply to all parts of the universe. Scientific ideas can change, but also scientific knowledge is durable. With new evidence, scientific ideas can change. But scientific ideas are also durable. It is more likely that well-founded, well-tested ideas will be modified over time rather than be replaced over time. So once again, scientific knowledge is more likely to be adjusted as time passes rather than replaced completely. Like the theory of evolution. Darwin proposed a theory that explained the fact of evolution. We know organisms change. You can see it. They do change. Darwin proposed a theory that explained how they change. And he didn't understand all of the parts and all of the processes. He didn't know what DNA was, for example. So over time, we've modified his idea and expanded upon it. So scientific knowledge can change, the ideas can change, but that knowledge is pretty durable. Science can't answer all questions. Some questions from a scientific point of view are meaningless. Why are we here, for example? That is not a question that science can answer, should answer, or is even all that interesting from a scientific point of view. It means nothing. It should not be tested by scientists. So scientists collect data to come up with approximations of the truth, of reality. How does gravity work? How does life evolve? How does the kidney work? We have a very good understanding of how these things work, but we may not know absolutely every minute detail. But we have approximations of reality. We do not go after absolute truth in science. That's just not our thing. It's something that cannot be measured, might not even exist, right? So we don't go after that, but we come up with explanations of natural phenomenon, models that explain how they work to the best of our understanding. But of course, evidence leads to different interpretations by different people. I can look at a set of data, you can look at a set of data. Let's say it's from Bio 1. You have a set of data over an enzyme experiment. We may come up with completely different interpretations of how that data happened, why that data happened. So scientific knowledge can lead to different interpretations. So we cannot always answer every question. We might not come up with the same answer to every question every time. So science most definitely cannot be used to answer questions of right and wrong, things like that. Science can help to inform questions of right or wrong. Is it right to dump trash in the ocean? Well, from a scientific perspective, we can say, well, here are the problems with dumping trash in the ocean, and here are the consequences, and that can help us to inform ourselves so we can make a moral decision. Science uses two types of reasoning, inductive and deductive. And there are some examples on the screen here. Inductive reasoning, this is when we go from general observations to broad conclusions. For example, when my car runs out of gas, it stops running. So when my car runs out of gas, it doesn't work anymore. So I could probably say, okay, cars rely on gasoline. That would be inductive reasoning. Finches on different islands are adapted to those islands. Therefore, organisms must be able to adapt to their environment, or adapt to their habitat. That's inductive reasoning, making observations of specific organisms in this case, and making a broad explanation as to why they are different. Deductive reasoning is when we have these broad observations and we use them to make specific predictions. For example, gasoline is the fuel for cars. So let's say I have this hypothesis, and then I can test it by looking at a specific instance. If I remove the gasoline from my tank, my car will quit running. Organisms evolve and have been evolving for a long time. If I look in rocks of the Devonian age, I should be able to find fossil organisms with the traits of both fish and amphibians. So that takes a broad idea, the idea of evolution, and then makes specific testable predictions. That's deductive reasoning. So inductive reasoning, making some observations, and then making a broad conclusion. For example, you notice your car quits running when it's out of gas. Your conclusion is that cars run on gasoline. Then you can test that logic using deductive reasoning by removing the gasoline from a full tank. So you pump all the gasoline out of a car, and then you test to see if it fails to run. So you can test your hypothesis. So overall, the basic steps of the scientific method that you're all familiar with: we make observations, we look at previous data. We then try to interpret that data. Why did this data happen? What is causing this phenomena? How does it work? And then we test our prediction or test our explanation. And importantly, we try to prove our prediction wrong. Never try to support your hypothesis. Always aim to prove it wrong. That's very important to stay true to the heart of science. You want to do your utmost to prove yourself wrong, because if you try to prove yourself right, you're going to be biased. You're going to miss data points that don't fit where you think they should, so you may well ignore them. And then you'll come up with incorrect interpretations, and then eventually another scientist is going to call you out and show you to be wrong. And it's just best to avoid that. If you can prove yourself wrong, then you can avoid the public shame of being humiliated when someone shows your theory to be incorrect or your hypothesis to be incorrect. So test your prediction. Try to prove it wrong. Then see if your data supports or refutes your hypothesis. Then you can publish your results and move science forward. Hypotheses, that first step of this process, are very important, or a very important step of this process. So we make observations and we come up with an explanation, the hypothesis. There's a null hypothesis, something you may not have talked about in Bio 1, H0 in this case. The null hypothesis states that there's no significant difference between your experimental and your variable and your control. For example, temperature will have no effect on catalase activity. You predict in that case that there is no effect. And then your experimental hypothesis, in this case H1, would be the same hypothesis you're used to writing. If temperature increases, then catalase activity will increase until it denatures. You may also have another experimental hypothesis, which you could label H2, which would be maybe some opposite reaction that you don't predict with your first hypothesis, like as temperature increases, catalase activity will decrease, for example. But the null hypothesis is the one you're really testing with your statistics. You're trying to show that there is a difference or is not a difference between your treatments. So our goal as a scientist is to either, and I say disprove here now, this is the only time you'll see me use this word, just to prove a point. We want to avoid this word as much as possible, but our goal is to prove or disprove or accept or reject, being the better scientific lingo, our null hypothesis. The null hypothesis being stated in this case that there is no difference between our treatments. Our goal is to show that whether that is right or wrong. And this is a good thing. It helps us to help prevent bias and dogmatic thinking. We're trying to show ourselves to be wrong, or we're trying to our best to design an experiment that roots out any weakness in our hypothesis. And the null hypothesis helps us to do that. There is no difference between longevity in an individual that takes this drug or who doesn't take this drug. And then we test to see if that is supported or refuted. The last part then of this process is the experiment. The experiment, you've done these before. We control extraneous variables. We do our best to test the hypothesis. And remember, no matter what your results, your hypothesis does not have to be supported for the experiment to be useful. A bad experiment is an experiment that fails to test your hypothesis, not one that disproves your hypothesis. So we gather our results, qualitative, quantitative data. So qualitative, what happened, what are your observations? Quantitative, what are the measurements? And then in your conclusion, if you're writing a paper, of course, the most important thing you can do as a scientist is use your knowledge, your brain, to interpret the results. Something that a lot of students fail to do at the cost of a good grade. You need to look at the data, look at your hypothesis, look at your background, and explain the data. Why did your data happen? What caused it to happen from a biological perspective? What caused your data to occur? After an idea, a hypothesis, for example, has been tested many times, and most importantly by many different people, many different experiments by many different people, not just one person, it can become a law or a theory. A law is generally narrow in scope, like the law of independent assortment, whereas a theory is a broad scientific fact, essentially, the closest thing in science that there is to fact, like the theory of evolution or the theory or cell theory that all living things are composed of cells. It's a broad explanation for the world that and both laws and theories can then be used to generate new hypotheses, and then those hypotheses can be tested, which then help to refine your theory over time. But one person cannot come up with a theory. We credit Darwin with the theory of evolution. Darwin came up with a hypothesis of evolution. It became a theory over time as evidence was so overwhelming that no one could show it to be wrong. A few other characteristics of science. Science does not recognize authority. We don't have leaders in science in the same way that you would in religion, for example. We don't have a science pope. Just because some big shot in science says something doesn't mean that other scientists won't tear it apart and see if it's right or wrong. We don't accept anything on authority. You always look at it, look at the facts, and see if they measure up. Science requires careful interpretation. Once again, different people can arrive at different interpretations looking at the same data. And the amazing thing about science, the thing that bugs so many people but is the beautiful thing about science, is that it's self-correcting and progressive. We all know that sometimes ideas in science change, and that drives some people crazy. They're used to dogmatic thinking, like a religious mindset, something that will never change. But science has to change with new evidence. It gets better over time. So these are some of the traits that make science different from other ways of knowing the universe. Science is a study of reality. It uses logic, reason, creativity, creative thinking, problem solving, and communication skills to help our species better understand the universe around us. See you in class.